There is an entity called the Adeep. Whatever you do, don't try to summon it. Michael. Yeah? Have you heard of the Adeep? And that's when it started. There was an air of skepticism in my response, as Larson had himself a track record of exaggerations and, sometimes, outright lies. I paused briefly. No. And I have a feeling you knew that, Larson. We were in my aunt's kitchen, Larson's mother. I shuffled downstairs around 9 in the morning, my nostrils taking in the smell of sizzling bacon and coffee beans turned liquid. Larson was already seated at the table reading some book. Horror, no doubt. I could feel his blank stare. Well, don't you want to ask me about it? He said. Sure, Larson, tell me all about him. He corrected me. And Flora slapped 2 yellow pancakes onto Larson's plate. Michael, how do you like your eggs, honey? Actually, I'll just have pancakes too, please, I replied. I waited for Larson to begin his story, but he was busy squeezing syrup and spreading butter on his breakfast, not waiting for it to cool down so that the butter wouldn't melt onto his plate. I'll tell you later, he finally replied to me, with his mouth full. I hated when he did that. No, not talking with his mouth full. Although I definitely hated that too. I hate when he brings up a subject that he's obviously passionate about, and when I finally give in to his nonsense and express interest, he decides to move on to something else. He did that so I'd beg him to tell me more, as if I'm the one who brought it up in the first place. Yeah, I hated that. Pretty smart, though. The next day, on a freezing night, Larson and I went camping. It took me about 30 minutes to start a fire, but it wasn't my fault. The yellow-orange flames crackled between our faces. The fire's warmth slowly brought down my eyelids in a gesture of subconscious relaxation. I dared not move my head too far from the crackling fire, for every time I did, the night's ice-cold air would sting against my face, reminding me that I wasn't actually out camping in the woods with my cousin Larson, but instead, we were in his parents' backyard. We should do this more often, man. I love these scary story nights, said Larson. My eyes shifted to the left and then back onto his illuminated face. This is literally our first one. He looked embarrassed. I know that, he replied, but I just know it's gonna be fun. That's about the only thing he and I bonded over. We consumed anything and everything horror. It began in middle school and continued into high school, and I was sure, one day, that we would be telling each other dark tales in our college dorm too. Larson scooted his chair to the left so that the fire between us wouldn't obscure his view of me. And then, in that backyard, he finally told the story he didn't finish telling me last morning. The Adeep is a spirit. That means it has no body or face that can be described. Oh, perfect, I quipped. How convenient for the people who made this up. Larson paused, sitting back in his chair, glaring at me. Can you not interrupt? I lowered my head and raised both my hands as if to surrender. Sorry, go on, I smiled. Like I said, it has no actual body. But, that doesn't mean you can't see it. For whatever reason, it can choose to manifest physically. And you know what else? Larson asked. I raised my eyebrows and leaned in closer, as if interested, but my sarcastic mannerisms didn't amuse him. But Larson leaned in closer too, the fire brightening his face and reflecting within his eyes. It said that the people who the Adeep had chosen to reveal itself to, died moments later. Sometimes mere hours later. They died when they saw his face, Michael. And how did they die? I asked, with a more serious tone. They killed themselves. So, let me get this straight, yeah? I began. I readjusted myself in the uncomfortable lawn chair he provided me and crossed one leg over the other. Just to bother him. You said earlier that no one has ever seen the Adeep, because it's a spirit, or whatever. But, it can sometimes manifest itself physically so that you can see it. And those people who the Adeep, for whatever sick reason, decided to reveal itself to, committed suicide later. For whatever reason. I'm assuming you mean to say that they were so terrified of what they saw that they couldn't take it anymore. Anyway, is that right? Everything I just said? Larson paused a moment before nodding his head, his brown medium-length hair jiggling. You don't see a problem with that, Larson? How do we know that these people saw its face? And how do we know that's the reason they killed themselves? Because, Michael, he sassed back at me. He leaned forward again, coming even closer. One of the victims gouged their eyeballs out, scooped them out of their sockets like vanilla ice cream. And another left a note behind, talking about how they couldn't unsee the face of the Adeep, and therefore decided that they didn't want to see anything at all. I paused before answering him. Why vanilla? And, okay, there's more than one problem with what you just said, but I'll let them go. But why gouge their eyes out when they were going to end their lives eventually? Did they really think they could continue living after that or something? Larson was irritated by these lawyer-esque questions. He simply wanted to tell a good old creepy story, after all. He wasn't having my nonsense. He made a deep sigh. Well, I don't know, Michael. But I do know that there's only one way to find out. So I guess you'll have to see for yourself. Oh. I see what you did there, I yelled excitedly. We shared a laugh at that under the night sky, and it lightened our mood. A week later, Larson and I found ourselves in his parents' backyard again. It was a warmer night. He told a few stories and so did I, and admittedly, his were better than mine. Scarier, that is. I scrolled through my iPhone. What about this one? Let me see, Larson said, his eyes looking up from his own phone. Nah, HorrorMode sucks. Their stories aren't that good. I looked down in shame, but took some relief in the fact that he had no idea it was my username, especially learning his opinion on my stories. So, how do you summon the Adeep, anyway? I asked suddenly. Larson smiled, as if he was waiting for the moment I would bring it up. He faced his iPhone down on his lap and gave me his full attention. Well, it's said. By who? I interrupted. Who says these things? I chuckled. Larson waited out my little rant, like waiting out a storm. You done, Michael? It's said that the way people summon the Adeep is by telling its story. It shows up to the person telling it, and to the one listening. But, it doesn't always show up, you know? Just like it doesn't always reveal itself physically to people. And thank God for that, right? I rolled my eyes. Right. Larson looked over at his swimming pool, whose vacuum sprayed the occasional whip of water like a spitting snake. I watched it too. And as my ears took in the gentle sound of the towering, dark trees as they danced at the breeze, I realized something. Wait, hold on, I began. You said that the way to summon the Adeep is by telling its story? That's one way to do it. It's been said. But isn't that what you just did? I interrupted him. Larson gazed into the fire, his body frozen. I smiled. And yet, it's not here, is it? I told you, Larson. It's nonsense. But he looked absolutely petrified. Larson? I said concerningly. He looked back up at me. Oh God, oh shit. Oh shit, oh God. Calm down, I said. You honestly believe you summoned the Adeep? Calm down, man. I want to go back inside, Michael. Okay, fine, go ahead. I'll be here, enjoying this fire. You know, the one that took me half an hour to start because you kept. You need to come inside too, Michael. This is no joke. My lips parted, and my mouth hung very slightly open. Are you serious? It's only 11 p.m. You really want to go back inside right now and waste another Saturday? It's our only time off before school starts, Saga. Please. Yelled Larson. Right now, please. We headed back inside and went straight to sleep. For Larson's comprehensive knowledge about the Adeep, it was sure funny how he forgot the most important piece of information about it. But that was Larson for you, funny. Only he could, and would, make a mistake like that. He scared himself to sleep, but I, on the other hand, slept like a baby. I didn't believe any of it anyway. Until Aunt Flora, Larson's mom, called our home, crying to my mother. Her screams were so loud and so piercing that my mother had to move the phone away from her ear. It was even audible from upstairs, and for a moment it seemed like the phone would crack open because Aunt Flora's cries were so loud. I heard her tell my mother over the phone that Larson had hung himself. Hours later, after Aunt Flora spoke with the cops, my mother brought her over to her home. Flora spent the night kicking and screaming on our living room floor, her face as red as a tomato. My mother couldn't understand what Flora did next, but I could. She didn't know what it meant, but I did. Aunt Flora, while still crying on our living room carpet, made repeated gestures with her hands. She kept pointing to her eyes, but couldn't utter a single word over her own tears. My mother just shook her head in confusion and cried with her. But I knew what she meant. She was telling my mother that she caught Larson trying to do something to his eyes, days before he hung himself. But he was unsuccessful there, because the police never mentioned anything about his eyes. It makes me think that the reason he ended his life is because he was too afraid to take his own vision, to actually, physically do it. But he had to do something. Larson had to do something because he saw the Adeep. He had to do something just like the other victims had to do something about what they saw. Whether it be to blind themselves and then end their lives later, having realized the situation they put themselves in. Or, to knock on death's door immediately after. And now here I am, writing this. This has made a firm believer out of me, that's for sure. And I've lost much sleep since it all happened. But how could I sleep, anyway? How? Because Larson said that one way to summon the Adeep is by telling its story. And that's when it shows up. It shows up to the one who told it. And to the one who listened. Larson also said that it doesn't always show up. But, with him being gone and all, I'm not sure how much faith I have that it won't come for me next. So now I wait, lying awake at night and gazing at my bedroom ceiling, afraid of what happens next in this story. Afraid of what I might see.